Did you know that Jamaica's first toll roads were established as far back as 1838? Or that a Jamaican woman was the first to ride a motorcycle around the world? Join me as we uncover these and other fascinating milestones, from the first hotel to open its doors in Jamaica, to the historical landing of the island's first airplane, and even the gripping tale of Jamaica's first fugitive. But that's just the beginning. There's so much more to explore. So get ready for an exciting journey through Jamaica's remarkable past.
Jamaica's first toll roads did not arrive with Highway 2000. They appeared over a century and a half earlier, around 1838. The history of tolls themselves stretches back much further, all the way to Greek mythology, where Cadran the ferryman charged a toll to carry the dead across the river Acheron. In their writing, Greek scholars Aristotle and Pliny refer to the use of tolls in Asia and Arabia. According to the Arthasastra, a Sanskrit political treatise, tolls were also said to have existed in 4th century India. Today, many countries use tolls as a means of revenue collection, including China, Canada, France, Denmark, Norway, Switzerland, and Austria. A toll is one whose use is monitored by the payment of a fee, generally collected by a toll authority, example, the government. There are also toll bridges and toll tunnels. Tolls were generally manned by toll keepers who lived in toll cottages adjacent to the toll payment location and were charged with collecting funds.
Mr. Bullen, I'm going to buy some lime to help my corn grow better. I can't pay you. I haven't got any money.
1 horse and cart. 4pence.
I haven't got it.
Tolls first appeared in the United Kingdom during the 17th century when the term turnpike came into use. A turnpike was originally a gate on which sharp pikes were placed as a defense against invading cavalry, although for Americans it simply means a toll road. The British meaning evolved to define the pike or stick that was raised when a toll was paid. Prior to the creation of toll gates, roads in England were mainly poorly maintained dirt tracks that every adult inhabitant of the parish required to work 4 days each year on the roads using their own tools. The increased use of wheeled vehicles, however, destroyed the upkeep as soon as the work had been completed. In general, the king monasteries or the aristocrats who owned the relevant land were responsible for road maintenance. As a result, not much was done to ensure road quality. The Turnpike Trust. With the advent of tolls came a new venture, the Turnpike Trust. Appointed by Parliament as a result of a 1706 Act, the trustees could erect tolls at their own discretion. The idea was that the trustees would borrow money to effect road repairs, although there were no road construction standards to adhere to at the time, and then they would repay it over the time through tolls collected. Although it seemed a simple and efficient system to put designated bodies in charge of road maintenance, the reality was that these debts were rarely repaid, while the trusts were simply renewed as needed. By the mid-18th century, turnpikes had been built on the 13 main roads from London, and in the next few years, close to 400 more were established. By 1825, over 1,000 trusts controlled some 23,000 miles of road in England and Wales, many of which linked major towns. Trusts and tolls were challenged by the advent of the railway, and in the later 19th century, with the last British trust disappearing in 1895, giving way to a road maintenance system overseen by country councils. In America, toll roads began in the late 18th century connecting different states. They peaked in the 19th century and were taken over by highway departments in the early 20th. Post-World War II, new and improved toll roads were built in the United States, heralding the streamlining of the interstate highway system. According to historian Frank Kundal, around 1838, a law was passed to ensure the maintenance of Hope Road, the road leading from Montgomery Corner in Ligonier to the junction of the Hope Road and Hog Hole rivers. Montgomery Corner is now known as Crossroads. and the rates were as followed: 10 pence on every wheel, horse, mule, cattle, and horned stock; 5 pence on every ass, sheep, goat, or pig. This was the first instance of tolls being paid in Jamaica, although during this period more and more taxes were levied on the peasant class. Peasant carts began to be taxed 18 shillings per year, and the taxes on food and clothing were increased 12-fold. The funds collected were used to provide additional services for the plantation owners. Naturally, unrest began to simmer, and toll gates were simply another log on that fire. Just like today, tolls were disliked for the wait at the toll gates and also for their cost. Some years later, in 1851, a board of commissioners of highways and bridges was appointed to take control of the toll gates. Some toll gates were placed at just strategic locations and roads leading to Savannah Lamar. This meant, however, that many people had to pay tolls each time they went to collect water. In February 1859, the people could take no more. They rioted. For 3 nights, protesters tore down the toll gates. During the next few months, the riot spread throughout Westmoreland. The Falmouth Post described the participants who destroyed the tollkeeper's house and toll gates at Savalamar as ruffians, some dressed in female attire. The Westmoreland police were unable to cope with this challenge. They could neither identify the protesters nor control their actions. Reinforcements had to be sent in from Hanover, Trelawney, St. James, and St. Elizabeth. Yet, none of this served to stop the people's objection to tolls. Even when some protesters were brought to trial, such a large crowd of supporters gathered that it was deemed prudent to adjourn the proceedings. By 1863, toll gate legislation had been repealed and the commissioner was ordered to sell the toll houses. Now, we're going to take a look at the Rebecca riots and the Welsh influence on our toll riots here in Jamaica. The fact that these protesters dressed in women's clothing could potentially be a link between Jamaican and Welsh history. On May 13, 1839, following a particularly harsh winter and poor harvest in West Wales, Welsh farmers reacted to the increased number of toll gates and the increased tolls charge. Supporters dressed in female clothes attacked the toll gates and the toll houses. This was the first of a series of what became known as the Rebecca riots. Dressing as women ensured protection of their identities, and the biblical symbolism gave their actions a spiritual calling. And they blessed Rebecca and said unto her, "Let thy seed possess the gates of those which hate them." And that's in Genesis somewhere. Rebecca and her daughters continued their attacks through the early 1840s, receiving support from the press and censure from law enforcement officials. There was no police force in West Wales at the time. The area relied instead on a cheaper alternative, the use of special constables and the military if necessary. The toll riots became increasingly violent and troops were called in to restore order. It didn't work. The rioters were simply emboldened and marches to petition magistrates soon followed. The government was forced to take these matters seriously. Promises were made, but they didn't quell the energy to strike out against not only toll gates, but any who had offended by increasing rents, tithes, etc. Soon, however, they were subdued by the presence of large numbers of troops, the moderating influence of the nonconformist chapels, who support the cause but did not condone the violence, and the commissioners sent to look into the accounts of the Turnpike Trust also helped to stop the riots in West Wales. Arrests were made, but by this time, the momentum had spread to the southeast, eventually with the use of force. Rebecca and her daughters were also silenced for a time, although sporadic outbreaks continued throughout the 19th century in West and North Wales. Eventually, some of the Rebecca-lites were brought to trial, some were convicted and sentenced to time in Australia. The commissioners made recommendations that road boards be established in each country to control the roads. In a strange twist of fate, this led to parts of Wales for a time having the honour of having the best road system in Britain. Given the significant press the Rebecca riots received in the United Kingdom, it is easy to believe that word of these actions could have reached the England colonies, with Jamaica being no exception. The timing of the Westmoreland tollgate riots also lends credence to the theory of a Welsh connection. Interestingly, The Welsh rioters were a mixture of educated middle class and poor working class, who received some media support. The Jamaican Westmoreland rioters were mainly peasants, but they too seem to have received support from media commentators, if not from the mainstream press itself. Consider the Falmouth Post description of the rioters, which reveals bitter contempt. The demolition of the toll gates in the parish of Westmoreland, the pulling down of toll keepers' houses, and the threats held out to persons in authority by a lawless, desperate rabble are events which have resulted from mischievous speeches which have appeared from time to time in the columns of newspapers owned by persons who are always boasting of their patriotism and friendship to the people. This was as cited in Virtue G, 1980. Now let's take a look at the Westmoreland unrest. Unlike the Welsh situation, however, the Jamaican Westmoreland toll riots led to the abolition of all toll gates in 1863. Perhaps the strongest reminder of this period in our history is the town of Tollgate, Clarendon. In addition, one historian writing the Gleaner in 1960s points to tolls as having helped to spearhead the practice of people carrying heavy loads on their heads. According to him, a toll gate was believed to have stood in the archway of the old fort at Rockfort. Recognizing that pedestrians were exempt from paying tolls, with ingenuity that has come to characterize Jamaicans, it is believed that people took to carrying loads in straw baskets on their heads, and passing through a separate space in the fort that was just narrow enough to allow passage. Thus, these pedestrians managed to carry loads and avoid any payment. Also cited in Virtue G, 1980. The Rebecca riots and the Westmoreland Tollgate riots of 1859 are both testimony to the spirit of resistance found amongst people in two countries whose histories share a similar theme of protest. The Welsh have long fought against English control, and the Jamaican peasants, following emancipation, demanded their say in how the country was to be run. It is no surprise, however, that the Morant Bay Rebellion was to follow the Tollgate riots in just a few short years. Did you know that Jamaica has 67 airstrips and 3 international airports? And did you know that Jamaica built its own airplane in 1937? Well, they didn't build one, they built 3 in all. But how did it all start? Let's go back in time. The history of aviation in Jamaica is a rich tapestry of pioneering feats, local ingenuity, and the evolution of a national airline that connected the island to the world. This journey spans from the early 20th century to the present, highlighting key milestones in the development of Jamaican aviation. The early days. First landing. The history of aviation in Jamaica began on December 21st, 1911, when the first airplane, piloted by American aviator Jesse Seligman, landed at the racecourse in Kingston, the area that is now known as National Heroes Park. This historic event drew a large crowd, eager to witness this technological marvel. People waited for hours, filled with anticipation and excitement to see the plane descend from the sky. Seligman's flight wasn't just a one-time spectacle. He performed multiple flights over the next few days, solidifying the fascination with aviation among Jamaicans and marking Jamaica's entry into the world of aviation. And just for reference, this occurred 8 years after the world recorded its first powered flight by the Wright brothers. 19 years later, on December 3rd, 1930, the first commercial flight, Pan American Consolidated Commodore, a twin-engined flying boat, landed in the Kingston Harbor. On November 21st, 1931, the famous U.S. aviator, Colonel Charles Lindbergh, brought the inaugural Pan American Sikorsky S-4 Clipper to Jamaica. And 1934 was also a historic year for the nation's aviation industry, when Dr. Albert Forsyth and Charles C. Anderson, the godfathers of African American aviation, arrived in Jamaica from Cuba. Growth and development, the interwar years. Following the historic landing, aviation slowly developed in Jamaica. The interwar years saw increased interest and occasional visits by pioneering aviators.
Notably, in 1929, Jamaican-born pilot Louis Hitchens, flying at the Havilland Gypsy Moth, became the first Jamaican to make a solo flight from the United States to Jamaica. This significant achievement demonstrated the growing capabilities and interest in aviation within Jamaica. The birth of local aviation: Miss Lou, Miss Jamaica, and Miss Pitts. Jamaica's aviation industry took a significant leap forward in the 1930s and 1940s. In 1937, the first Jamaican-built aircraft, named Miss Lou, took to the skies. This aircraft was constructed by Jamaica Welfare Limited under the guidance of Norman Manley, a prominent Jamaican statesman at the time. Miss Lou was a testament to local craftsmanship and innovation, showcasing Jamaica's ability to contribute to aviation technology. Alongside Miss Lou, Jamaica also saw the creation of Miss Jamaica and Miss Pitts. Miss Jamaica was a DH-60G Gypsy Moth that played a crucial role in local aviation history. Meanwhile, Miss Pitts, a Pitts Special, highlighted the skill and the dedication of Jamaican engineers and aviators. These aircraft symbolized Jamaica's growing confidence and capability in aviation. And this era also saw the establishment of Palisadoes Airport, now Norman Manley International Airport, in 1939, which became a central hub for aviation activities on the island, further bolstering Jamaica's position in the aviation world. If you are intrigued by the story of aviation in Jamaica as I am, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating historical explorations. Your support helps us to bring more content like this. And if you'd like to further support the channel, consider checking out the links in the description for ways to contribute. Now, let's get back on the flight. Post-war expansion. The rise of commercial aviation. After World War II, commercial aviation began to flourish. In 1948, British West Indian Airways, or BWIA, started regular flights to Jamaica, connecting the island with other Caribbean destinations. This period also witnessed the birth of Jamaica's own commercial airline, Caribbean International Airways, which commenced operations in 1947 but had a short-lived existence. The Golden Age, Air Jamaica. The pinnacle of Jamaican aviation came with the establishment of Air Jamaica on August 1, 1968. The national airline, affectionately known as Lovebird, was a symbol of Jamaican pride and independence. Initially a joint venture with Air Canada, Air Jamaica expanded rapidly, offering flights to North America, Europe, and the Caribbean. During the 1970s and 80s, Air Jamaica became synonymous with Jamaican hospitality and service. The airline's brightly colored livery and signature, out of many one people, reflected the spirit of the nation. At its peak, Air Jamaica operated a modern fleet, including Boeing 727s, Airbus A300s, and the later Airbus A320s. The decline and the sale. Transition to Caribbean Airlines. Despite its success, financial difficulties plagued Air Jamaica. The airline struggled with debt and operational inefficiencies, leading to multiple government bailouts. In 2010, in an effort to stem the losses, the Jamaican government sold Air Jamaica to Trinidad and Tobago's Caribbean Airlines. This transition marked the end of an era for many Jamaicans who had grown up with the Lovebird as a symbol of national pride. Caribbean Airlines maintained some of the former Air Jamaica routes and integrated the brand into its operations, ensuring continued connectivity for Jamaica. Modern day, continued evolution. Today, Jamaican aviation continues to evolve. Norman Manley International Airport in Kingston, Sangster International Airport in Montego Bay both serve as key gateways to the island, handling millions of passengers annually. And the newly opened Ian Fleming International Airport in St. Mary, named after the famous author who resided in Jamaica, further enhances the island's aviation infrastructure. Additionally, Jamaica boasts a total of 67 airstrips, reflecting its robust aviation network. And did you know that 10 locations were examined before the Palisadoes site was considered for Jamaica's first airport? Some of the sites considered were Bumper Hall, the War Department lands at Up Park Camp, and Arbor Head, a site on De Niro Road,
the Norman Range lands, Mona, the Greenwich Reclamation Area, Maypen, Kingston Pen lands, and Kingston Racecourse. Caribbean Airlines remains a vital link, while other international carriers have increased their presence, underscoring Jamaica's importance as a tourist destination. In addition to commercial aviation, general aviation has also grown, with local flight schools and private operators contributing to the industry. The development of Vernon Field Aerodrome as a cargo and logistics hub represents a new chapter in Jamaican aviation, promising economic growth and increased connectivity. The history of Jamaican aviation is a testament to the island's resilience, innovation, and global connectivity. From the first landing at the racecourse to the national pride embodied by Air Jamaica and the continued evolution of air travel, aviation has played a crucial role in shaping Jamaica's modern identity. As the industry moves forward, the legacy of those early pioneers and the spirit of the lovebird continue to inspire future generations of Jamaican aviators. This Jamaican woman rode solo across the United States in the 1930s on a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. In spite of rampant racism, she was very happy on two wheels. Welcome back to Elite Jamaica, the place you come to learn about Jamaica and Jamaicans. If it's your first time joining me here, consider subscribing to the channel by clicking that red subscribe button, and do remember to turn on notifications by clicking that bell icon so you never miss any of my updates.
Alright then, wave the flag and we proud of our country. Mr. God say we reach half a century. Black, green and gold, represent the sun, the land, the people holds.
Our people, the strength of the land. Half a century we work for the plan. Rise the future to where we belong. Raised by the blessing and so we strong woman.
Eternal Father bless you, woman. I am proud to be Jamaican. Respect goes to my sunshine girl. Watch Miss Jamaica got on Miss World. And grab a physical beauty. Yeah, put them in a dress and in a spelling bee. Down to my little sister. No say she can't turn prime minister. Jamaica.
Today is the day. Start your ignition.
Bessie Stringfield was a legendary force during the ripening of American motorcycle culture. As a woman of color participating in a taboo lifestyle, she faced immeasurable prejudice, yet she lived by a simple credo: what I did was fun, and I loved it. In 1930, at the age of 19, Stringfield became the first African-American woman to ride across the United States solo. Before the interstate highway system, road travel was haphazard at best. Pavement was scarce and dirt roads were carved with danger, if they existed at all. As a skilled rider, Stringfield navigated these challenges, but discrimination and Jim Crow laws posed even more treacherous hurdles. Betsy Ellis was born February 9, 1911 in Kingston, Jamaica, to a white Dutch mother and Jamaican father. Soon her parents moved the family to Boston, but both died of smallpox when Betsy was 5 years old. It's unclear when or why her name was changed to Bessie. In Boston, an Irish Catholic woman adopted Bessie and raised her in a devout household. Bessie would call the woman her mother the rest of her life, but never name her in interviews. When Bessie was 16, she asked her mother for a motorcycle and received a 1928 Indian Scout. Despite not knowing how to operate the controls, she attributed her talent to the grace of God, whom she called the man upstairs. When I got on the motorcycle, I put the man upstairs on the front. I am very happy on two wheels, she told journalist and author Anne Farrar in Hear Me Roar, Women Motorcycles and the Rapture of the Road, that's in 1996. After her first trip across the US, Bessie would complete the journey 7 more times, eventually visiting all 48 contiguous states, plus Europe, Brazil, and Haiti. Her favorite game was tossing a penny onto a map and traveling wherever it landed. To fund her trips, Bessie performed motorcycle stunts for local carnivals, which helped secure her fame. As she traveled throughout the 1930s and 40s, Bessie faced risks at every turn. As an African-American woman who participated in an alternative lifestyle, she was treated as a second-class citizen, especially in the Deep South, where few black people were able to move freely. When motels denied her accommodation, she slept in gas station parking lots, her motorcycle a bed, her jacket a pillow. Once she was reportedly knocked off the road by a white man in a pickup truck. She married 6 times in total. After losing 3 babies with her first husband, Bessie's heartbreak kept her from ever trying again to have children. Despite divorcing her third husband, Arthur Stringfield, he insisted she keep his surname, because I had made it famous, said Bessie. By World War II, Stringfield and her Harley-Davidsons were fixtures on the motorcycle circuit. To her, Harleys were the only motorcycle ever made. She would own 27 during her lifetime. She worked with the Army as a civilian motorcycle dispatch rider, the only woman in her unit carrying messages between domestic bases. She affixed the Army crest to the front of her blue Harley 61. In the 1950s, Stringfield made her home in Miami, where she became a registered nurse and funded the Iron Horse Motorcycle Club. She was repeatedly pulled over, she said, by police officers who claimed N-word women are not allowed to ride motorcycles. Rather than quit, Stringfield arranged a meeting with the chief of police, took him to a local park, and proved her motorcycle skills firsthand. She was never targeted by police again. Instead, she performed in races and earned the nickname the Motorcycle Queen of Miami. After winning one race disguised as a man, she took off her helmet to claim the prize and was subsequently In the year 2000, the American Motorcycle Association honored Stringfield with an exhibition and created the Bessie Stringfield Award, presented annually to an individual who has been instrumental in bringing motorcycling to new audiences. She was inducted into the Motorcycle Hall of Fame in 2002. In June 2016, the Miami Times reported that 200 female riders would travel to Stringfield's South Florida home to honor the late pioneer. Stringfield, however, had died in 1993 at age 82 from complications surrounding an enlarged heart. Though her doctor had advised her to stop riding, she told him, "If I don't ride, I won't live long," and so she never did quit.
In the 1940s and 50s, the parish of Portland, and in particular the town of Port Antonio, was the setting of numerous Hollywood films and the favorite destination of many Hollywood stars, including Errol Flynn, Clara Bow, Rudyard Kipling, and Ginger Rogers. It is said that Errol Flynn was so in love with the area he claimed he never met a woman as beautiful as Port Antonio. Robin Moore, the author of The French Connection, is said to have written the famous novel while sitting under a mango tree in Port Antonio. Many feel that Port Antonio's relative underdevelopment compared to the island's other resort towns gives it a special charm. Portland formally became a parish in 1723 by order of the Duke of Portland, who was then the governor of Jamaica and after whom it was named. The existing port was to be called Port Antonio and was slated to become a naval stronghold. To that end, by 1729, the British began to build Fort George on the peninsula separating the twin east and west harbors, known as the Titchfield Promontory. The fort was intended to protect settlers against attacks by sea from the Spanish and from the hills by the Maroons. In 1739, the Maroons signed a peace treaty with the British, and this led to a new period of development in Portland. Settlers started pouring in, accepting the governor's offer of free land and slaves. Many began large-scale sugar cultivation, and by 1779, there were 38 large estates and more than 100 cattle pens and small holdings. Portland fortunes, though, were to take a turn for the better in the late 19th century, with the development of the banana industry. Portland's soil and heavy rains were well suited to banana cultivation, and almost any size farmer could grow banana for a profit. Banana, a quick-growing crop that can be ready to reap within a year, also had another advantage over sugar. It can be harvested throughout the year. Lorenzo Dow Baker, the man credited with single-handedly jump-starting banana production for export on the island, arrived in Jamaica in 1870. The island was experiencing a decline in sugar production and increased competition from beet sugar. Its protected market was gone. A new export crop was needed. Baker turned popular attention to the banana, long regarded as a source of local food, particularly for black Jamaicans, as slaves had it as their main cultivation on their provision grounds. Famed botanist Sir Hans Sloane, who founded the British Museum, noted the existence of bananas in Jamaica from as far back as 1688. Baker, who owned an 85-ton sailing ship, decided the market was big enough for him to play a part. His first Jamaican cargo included coconuts, coffee, pimento, bananas, and bamboo. all of which sold quickly after the 2-week trip. Baker, not one to let opportunity pass him by, saw the two-way potential of his tropical trade, and he loaded up with flour, pork, cured meats, codfish, herring, boots, shoes, furniture, and textiles, and returned to Jamaica. Man, you are a real hustler. It was on the second visit that he landed in Portland, where he sold some of his cargo. He used the profit to purchase a cargo of bananas at 25 cents per bunch. He eventually left Portland with some 450 bunches of banana. Baker encouraged Jamaicans to plant banana with the challenge: the first man who has 10 acres of bananas will be rich. Baker's Jamaican bananas were then sold in Boston for guess how much? $2.50 US. That's $2.50 US each. Check that, peeps. Write your answer in the comment sections. In 1879, Baker became the agent for a newly formed shipping company that enabled him to expand his transportation of bananas. Baker established an office in Port Antonio and began to make an average of 5 trips per year. He formed the Boston Fruit Company by buying out smaller concerns. Small farmers began to buy and rent land all over the parish to plant banana. Baker expanded by buying estates, including Bog near Port Antonio and Bowden in Morant Bay, more ships, and building piers. He soon faced increased competition, especially from the Keith and Linda families, who were engaged in a thriving fruit trade from Costa Rica to New York. In 1885, after buying out some of his competitors, including the Keith interests, his enterprise became known as the United Fruit Company. By 1902, Baker controlled the entire island's banana trade. St. Mary had also emerged as a major producer of bananas, and he went on to supply fruit all along the east coast of the United States and later New Orleans, Montreal, and London. Regular exports to Britain had begun in 1901 with Sir Alfred Jones' Imperial Direct Steam Line, which included refrigerated machinery, employed to the United Fruit Company and later bought out by them. Some 650 tons of banana were shipped to the UK each month. As Baker's trade grew, Port Antonio became the second most important town in Jamaica. Most of his workers lived in Portland. Those who did not grow bananas reaped them or loaded them onto ships, earning some 70 cents per day. Now, money was new to the people of Portland, and it is said that some became so rich they used the 5-pound notes to light their cigarettes. Knowledge of saving was sadly lacking. Again, showing great foresight and entrepreneurial spirit, Baker began to use his steamships to carry tourists as well as bananas. Those ships were for a long time the only form of travel between Jamaica and other countries. Guest houses built for his workers and officers were also used to host those early Portland visitors. As the trips to Jamaica increased in popularity, Baker built the magnificent Titchfield Hotel on the Titchfield Hill in the early 1900s, and soon the streets of Port Antonio were filled with tourists, giving Portland claim to the title of Birthplace of Jamaican Tourism. In 1905, the hotel boasted 600 feet of piazza and 400 rooms. It was said that no hotel on this side of the Atlantic is provided with more of those conveniences that minister so largely to the pleasure of travelers. The Titchfield Hotel became known for its afternoon tea on the piazza and bathing in bathhouses. Rich life. One of Titchfield Hotel's great claims to fame is that it was once owned by famous Hollywood swashbuckler Errol Flynn, who died before he could put any of his plans to develop the hotel into place. In the late 1960s, the hotel was destroyed by fire. Today, only the ruins of this great landmark still stand. In 1903, Portland was devastated by a hurricane. The banana fields were ruined. Shortly thereafter, an outbreak of disease occurred, destroying the surviving plants. In 1929, an interesting development occurred. Banana farmers came together and formed the Jamaica Banana Producers Association to act as one body and protect their independence and prevent large companies like the United Fruit Company from assuming complete control of the trade. With the help of the government, within a few years, the Jamaica Producer Association was handling a substantial portion of the trade and running its own shipping line. In 1936, the association became a private trading company, but is still largely owned by and identified with the banana farmers. The banana industry peaked in 1936 with exports of 355 tons. In a few years, however, it went into decline. Today, the Jamaica Producers Group of Company, along with the All Island Banana Growers Association, continues to serve the interests of the island's banana farmers and industry facing the repeal of protected trade agreements in the next 5 years.
Well, it's our major production. We can't do without it.
If you kill the bananas, you kill the livelihood of the Caribbean people.
As an 8-year-old boy at the Trinityville Primary School in St. Thomas, just a few miles from Morant Bay, the capital, I first heard the name of Three Finger Jack, an outlaw who stages resistance against the system of slavery in eastern Jamaica. This is the legend of Jack Mansong, better known as Three Finger Jack. Welcome back to Elite Jamaica, the place you come to learn about Jamaica and Jamaicans. If it's your first time joining me here, consider subscribing to the channel by clicking that red subscribe button. And do remember to turn on notifications by clicking that bell icon so you never miss any of my updates.
I'm on the mission. A mission. Today is the day.
Perhaps the most feared runaway slave in Jamaica during the 1700s was Jack Mansong, popularly known as Three Finger Jack, Jamaica's first infamous badman. A slave who exploits as a guerrilla fighter, starting in 1780 until his death in January 1781, sparked a wave of literary works which kept his legend alive well beyond the shores of Jamaica. Historians say that the very mention of Mansong's name drove fear into the hearts of white plantation owners in Jamaica and those in Britain. He was also the first fugitive in Jamaica's history to have a bounty of £300 placed on his head. During the slavery years, there were many runaway slaves and rebels, but Jack's reputation was legendary, considering that his time as a fugitive lasted less than a year, between 1780 and 1781. The marker mounted in 1978 says of Jack in part, strong, brave, skilled with a machete or musket, his bold exploits were equaled only by his chivalry. He loved his country and his people. He was said to have never harmed a woman or child. But who was Jack Mansong? Where was he born? These are among the questions that continue to haunt students of history fascinated by the legend of Three Finger Jack. Jack Mansong fled the slave plantation and at first hid at a spot at the head of Cane River, but later retreated to the Queensberry Ridge of the Blue Mountains, living in a cave that came to bear his name. He and his band of runaway slaves would lie in wait on the highway in the vicinity of 11 miles where they robbed and killed travelers on the Windward Road that linked Kingston with the eastern part of the island. Believed to be a giant in stature, standing close to 7 feet tall, he would become known as Three Finger Jack after losing 2 digits in a fight with a maroon known as Quashi, who would eventually be credited with killing him. By the end of 1780, the colonial government had become frustrated that all efforts to rid the society of Three Finger Jack had failed, despite the posting of rewards by the British government and the Colonial Assembly. To boost their drive to capture Mansong, the colonists offered full freedom to any slave who would bring the feared rebel to justice, dead or alive. Jack Mansong's short but effective guerrilla warfare ended on January 27, 1781, according to an account in the Royal Gazette of February 3, 1781. The report states that Three Finger Jack was surprised near the entrance of his cave by Quashi, who had converted to Christianity and was now known by the name John Reader, and a small slave boy known as a good shot. Alone and unarmed, he reportedly had time only to seize a machete before being shot 3 times when attacked by Quashi. Mortally wounded, Jack threw himself off a precipice, and surprisingly, Quashi followed. The two engaged in hand-to-hand combat, with Jack putting up a good fight before succumbing to Quashi. The slave boy bashed his head in with a rock and both he and Reader proceeded to cut off his 3-fingered hand and head. Feared as much for his fighting skills and his hobby, Jack, who in his life was the essence of the strong spirit of a freedom fighter, was reduced to a humiliating end. His decapitated head was put on a bamboo pole and carried by his proud victors, followed by a crowd, celebrating as they marched first to Morant Bay and then to Spanish Town to collect the reward of £300. The head and hand of Jack Mansong were preserved for 20 years at Spanish Town. Despite driving fear into the hearts of the colonialists and being branded as a cold-blooded murderer, The exploits of Three-Fingered Jack were used by anti-slavery activists in England to advocate human dignity for both West Indian and African blacks. So the next time you drive out to St. Thomas from St. Andrew in the vicinity of Bull Bay, be sure to look out for the historic marker in honor of Three-Fingered Jack. Thank you.
If you have been watching this channel for a while, then you have learned that Jamaica had 22 parishes some time ago. Jamaica is part of a 28-island archipelago. There is an island between Jamaica and Haiti called Navassa that we should all pretend does not exist to please the powers that be. Also, a Jamaican invented the blood bank. But how many of us know that the Jamaican flag is the only flag in the world that doesn't share any colors of the American flag? This is according to an email making the rounds on the internet. This is not exactly so, however, as Mauritania has a green and yellow flag and Libya has green only, also doesn't share any of these colors. I checked, and even the flag of the newly created South Sudan carries red, white, and blue. It also has black, green, and gold, making it one of the most colorful flags. Jamaica has 3 colors, nevertheless, and qualifies in this respect. Note the comment section you go lively today. Then again, how many know that Jamaica is the first British colonial territory to establish a postal service, having been the first colony England acquired by conquest? The web fact is incorrect in one respect. During the reign of King Charles II, the governor of Jamaica was instructed to make arrangements for the establishment of a post office in Jamaica. This was because of the complaints from early settlers concerning the slow delivery of mail. As a result, on August 31st, 1671, not 1688 as what the web says, Jamaica became the first British colony to have established a post office. The post office was established in the then capital, St. Diego de la Vega, or Spanish Town as it is now known. In the United States, William Penn established its first post office in 1683 in Pennsylvania, 12 years after Jamaica. In the South, private messengers, usually slaves, connected the huge plantations. A hogshead of tobacco was the penalty for failing to relay mail to the next plantation. Central Postal Organization came to the United States colonies only after 1691, when Thomas Neal received a 21-year grant from the British Crown for a North American postal service. Therefore, it seems to me, Jamaica could lay claim to having the first post office in the entire Western Hemisphere. Jamaica has the most churches per square mile of any country in the world. Source: Guinness Book of World Records. That's another factor making the rounds. I have not been able to actually verify the same with Guinness, but ever since I've known myself, I've heard this said about Jamaica. So I believe this one. As we say in Jamaica, if it no go so, it near go so. Jamaica was the first country in the Western world to construct a railway, even before the United States. This is not true. The Baltimore and Ohio Railway in the United States was incorporated in 1827 and officially opened in 1830. Other railroads soon followed, including the Camden and Amboy in 1832. The railways of Jamaica, constructed from 1845, were the first railway lines open to traffic outside Europe and North America, and the second British colony after Canada's Champlain and the St. Lawrence Railroad of 1836 to receive a railway system. Construction started only 20 years after George Stephenson's Stockton and Darlington Railway commenced operations in the United Kingdom. Golfing in Jamaica. The Manchester Golf Club in Jamaica, established in 1868, is the oldest in the Western Hemisphere. This web assertion appears to be accurate, except for the year. Built on the hills near Mandeville in 1865, the Manchester Golf Club is Jamaica's and the Caribbean's oldest golf course. The course boasts 9 greens and 18 teeing grounds. The earliest clubs formed outside of Scotland was the Royal Blackheath Golf Club of England, which came into existence in 1766, followed by the Old Manchester Golf Club, founded on the Kersal Moor in 1818. 18th century golf in the United States, while known to exist, did not catch on, as it was Canada that golfers established firm roots in North America. The Royal Montreal Club was formed in 1873. 8 years after Mandeville, the Quebec Golf Club in 1875, followed by a golf club in Toronto in 1876. It wasn't until 1888 that golf resurfaced in the United States. Jamaica was the first commercial producer of bananas in the Western Hemisphere. This appears to be true. Thanks in part to shipping and refrigeration, bananas were able to be sent long distances. Elders and Fifes established the Imperial Direct Line between Bristol and Jamaica in 1901. This was taken over by the United Fruit Company in 1910. Another fact making it on the web is that Jamaica had electricity before the United States. This one is not believable, as Thomas Edison distributed electricity using direct current, which required thick copper wires and was limited by the maximum distance of 1.5 miles. Meanwhile, Nikola Tesla developed the more feasible method of distribution using alternating current. Westinghouse used Tesla's system to light the world's Columbian Exposition at Chicago in 1893. His success was a factor in winning the contract to install the first ore machinery at Niagara Falls, which bore Tesla's name and patent numbers. The project carried power to Buffalo by 1896. History records that one of the first ever pipe water supply systems for the Western Hemisphere originated in the Jamaican town of Falmouth, Trelawney. In 1766, Roger Hope Elliston, owner of the Hope Estates, constructed an open conduit to carry surplus water from his property to the then town of Kingston, with branches at Duke, King, and Orange Streets. The Hope River was the source of this supply, and the conduit was constructed at his own expense. The system fell into a state of disrepair and its operation was eventually discontinued in 1777. The development of pipe water supplies in Jamaica, however, can be traced back to 1799, when the Falmouth Water Works Company was established with the Martha Brae as its source to supply the town of Falmouth with water. It was therefore the first town in Jamaica to enjoy convenience of a piped water system. The Falmouth water wheel today stands solidly as a monumental example of one of the first water supply systems. Thank you so much for watching.
Did you know that Jamaica has over 600 post offices and postal agencies? Not only that, Jamaica was the first Caribbean island to establish a post office, and it might have been the first in the entire Western Hemisphere. But we'll get to that. Jamaica boasts an impressive network managed by the Post and the Telecommunications Department, also known as Jamaica Post. They oversee more than 400 postal points, including 164 postal agencies and 237 post offices. The central office is located at 6 to 10 South Camp Road in Kingston. Jamaica Post operates under the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, demonstrating its integration with the government's strategic functions. But while sending letters is no longer the primary mode of communication due to digital accessibility, the postal system remains essential for many reasons. Jamaica Postal Services, with a rich history spanning several centuries, continues to strive and adapt to modern needs. So, have you ever used the post office? And do you think this system is relevant in today's digital age? Like the video and let's proceed. The history of post offices in Jamaica. Jamaica's postal history dates back to 1663, during King Charles II's reign, when residents were frustrated by slow mail delivery. Lieutenant Governor Thomas Lynch was tasked with establishing a post office operated by the Postmaster General of London. The Jamaican postal system officially began on October 31st, 1671, making it the first British colony in the Caribbean. But is it the first in the Western Hemisphere? In the United States, William Penn established its first post office in 1863 in Pennsylvania. That's 12 years after Jamaica. In the southern United States, private messengers, usually slaves, connected the huge plantations. A hogshead of tobacco was the penalty for failing to relay mail to the next plantation. Central Postal Organization began in the U.S. colonies only after 1691, when Thomas Neal received a 21-year grant from the British Crown for a North American postal service. Therefore, it seems to me
Jamaica could lay claim to having the first post office in the entire Western Hemisphere. If you agree with me, give the video a thumbs up. Gabriel Martin, the first Postmaster General of Jamaica, set up initial post offices in St. Diego de la Vega, now Spanish Town, and at the port of Passage Fort, now in St. Catherine. However, the service was unreliable, leading many to prefer sea captains for mail delivery. In 1705, naval administrator and surveyor Edmund Dummer initiated a packet service that managed to deliver about 1,500 private letters annually to England, despite frequent failures. After Dummer's death in 1713, regular mail service resumed in 1745 under the General Post Office of London, which then managed post offices throughout the West Indies. With the growing sugar industry in the mid-18th century, demand for reliable postal services increased. Edward Dismore, appointed Postmaster General in 1754, established around 34 post offices across Jamaica, including major ones in Spanish Town, Old Harbour, and Clarendon. The main post office moved from Spanish Town to Harbour Street in Kingston in 1776, reflecting Kingston's growing importance. Introduction of stamps. By the 1840s, steamship services and the introduction of postage stamps revolutionized the postal system. Prior to stamps, recipients paid for mail upon delivery, often refusing payment. In 1840, the first adhesive postage stamps, the 1 penny black and the 2 pence blue, featuring Queen Victoria, were introduced in the UK by Rowland Hill. These stamps standardized postal rates regardless of distance. Jamaica gained control of its postal system in 1858, and by 1860 the island began issuing its own stamps, distinguished by a pineapple watermark. Initially, these stamps featured the Queen's portrait and were produced in England. In 1900, Jamaica issued its first pictorial stamp, depicting Landover Falls. Joining the Universal Postal Union in 1877 facilitated international mail exchanges. By 1903, mail delivery in Jamaica utilized bicycles, improving efficiency. Following the 1907 earthquake, the main post office moved to King Street in downtown Kingston. However, increasing mail volumes necessitated a modern facility. By 1980, a new head office with an automated central sorting office was completed, streamlining operations significantly. So why is the postal service still around? And why is it still essential today? Despite the rise of digital communication, the postal service remains crucial for several reasons. First, the delivery of packages has grown exponentially with the boom in online shopping. Second, many official documents and services, such as YouTube verification numbers, still require a physical address for verification purposes. This ensures security and authenticity in a way digital means sometimes cannot. Additionally, certain legal and governmental documents are often mandated to be sent by way of traditional mail to ensure that they reach the intended recipient securely and officially. Jamaica's postal system, rooted in a rich history, has evolved significantly, from its colonial beginnings to a modern, efficient service. The ongoing efforts by the Jamaica Post and the Postal Corporation of Jamaica ensure that despite changes in the communication methods, the postal service remains a vital part of the nation's infrastructure. Sergeant William Robinson Clark was a Jamaican World War I airman and also the first black pilot to fly for Britain. He defied racial barriers and served his country with distinction during World War I. Born on October 4, 1895, in Kingston, Jamaica, Clark was the youngest of 6 children born to Henry and Eugenia Clark. His fascination with flying began when he saw planes flying overhead during his teenage years. He was determined to become a pilot himself and made plans to travel to England to pursue his dream. In this video, we'll delve into the remarkable life of William Robinson Clark, the first Jamaican pilot to fly for the British, enlisting in the Royal Flying Corps. After the outbreak of the First World War, the brave 19-year-old William joined thousands of others from the Caribbean to fight for a country that had once enslaved generations of black men and women. He paid £150 sterling in 1915 to travel from Kingston, Jamaica to England so that he could learn how to fly and support the war effort. This life-changing decision eventually saw William becoming Britain's first black pilot.
The British Empire was one of the world's great powers. A quarter of the world was under its control. To win the war, Britain had to mobilise as many people as possible. And at home and across the empire, people largely signed up for the same reasons. In the West Indies, for example, many were intensely patriotic and saw it as their duty to fight for king and country. Others saw the war as an opportunity to escape from poverty at home and see the world in the process.
Despite the racial prejudices at the time, Clark was determined to serve his country and pursue his dream of becoming a pilot. His application to the RFC was initially rejected due to his race, but he persisted and eventually gained acceptance. Clark underwent rigorous training to become a fighter pilot. He was one of the few Jamaican men to serve in the RFC, and he faced discrimination and skepticism from some of his fellow servicemen and instructors. However, Clark proved himself to be an excellent pilot, and he was highly regarded by his superiors.
The RFC obviously is a very technical branch of the military, and these men were in short supply. There was not that many people who could drive a motor vehicle in 1914, so when Clark turns up, first and foremost, this man is a mechanic and a driver.
Clark ended up as a mechanic in France before being put forward for pilot training in 1916. When he returned in 1917, he joined No. 4 Squadron, flying RE-8s, two-seater reconnaissance aircraft.
He learned to fly the Sopwith Camel biplane, one of the most famous and successful planes of the war. In December 1916, he began pilot training, gaining his wings on the 26th of April 1917. He was promoted to pilot sergeant and he was posted to the No. 4 Squadron RFC at Abil on the 27th of May 1917. He was flying the RE-8 biplane over the Western Front. On the morning of the 28th of July 1917, during a reconnaissance mission, flying 5 miles behind the German front line near Ypres, Sergeant Clark and his observer, 2nd Lieutenant F.P. Blencow, were attacked by armed German scout aircraft. After Clark was seriously wounded and lost consciousness, his observer brought the aeroplane back across British lines before making a forced landing near Gadiwarsveld. In a letter to his mom, Clark wrote, "I was doing some photographs a few miles the other side when about 500 scouts came down upon me, and before I could get away, I got a bullet through the spine. I managed to pilot the machine nearly back to the aerodrome, but had to put her down as I was too weak to fly anymore. My observer escaped without any injury." Training and service in World War I. Clark's first operational posting was the No. 33 Squadron, which was stationed on the Western Front. He flew his first combat mission in June 1918, providing air support for ground troops during the Battle of Belleau Wood. Over the course of the war, Clark flew a total of 60 combat missions and was credited with shooting down 4 German planes. One of Clark's most notable achievements occurred on August 19, 1918. He was flying with 3 other pilots when they encountered a group of German planes. Clark shot down 2 of the planes and forced the others to retreat. His courage and skill in combat earned him the Distinguished Flying Cross, which was awarded to him by King George V. Clark's service in the RFC was not without its challenges. He faced racism and discrimination from some of his fellow pilots and the ground crew, and he was often subjected to insults and slurs. However, Clark remained focused on his duty and remained determined to prove himself as a capable and skilled pilot. Post-war life. After the war ended in 1919, Clark returned to Jamaica. He initially struggled to find work and was unable to secure a job as a pilot due to racial prejudice. Instead, he worked as a mechanic and later as a civil servant. Clark continued to stay involved in aviation, however, and he helped to establish the Jamaica Flying Club in 1932. His achievement as the first Jamaican pilot to fly for the British during World War I made him a hero in Jamaica and beyond. He inspired other young Jamaicans to pursue their dreams and showed that anything was possible with hard work and determination. Clark remained humble and never sought fame or recognition for his services in the RFC. William Robinson Clark's achievement paved the way for future generations of Jamaican pilots in the British military. He inspired other Jamaican men and women to pursue careers in aviation and showed that racial barriers could be overcome. Clark's legacy continues to be celebrated in Jamaica and beyond, and he is remembered as a pioneer in aviation history. Thank you for watching.
One of the men who did this was William Robinson Clark, or Robbie Clark. He was from Jamaica, and before the war he was a chauffeur, a mechanic. What Clark did was he went directly to Farnborough, the home of the Royal Flying Corps, and asked to join the RFC. And they signed him up.
Clark ended
20. We managed to secure his identity bracelet, and this is a very important object because, again, just as stories have generally been forgotten, the collecting of material by museums was also not really done. We are actively trying to actually collect this material now because we want to tell those wider, more diverse stories.